All right. It's a bit difficult and stranger for me to speak to someone else besides the students that I've been speaking to the past few days. I I feel in some ways that you are also students, and I am too, because I learn something every single day. You know, this last trip has been, I don't say last trip, but this trip to Germany, it's not my first. I've been here at least 8 times to Germany and at least 5 times to this beautiful city. But it's very special to me because, to be honest with you, I didn't expect to make it here this time around. A lot of things going back home. I have 3 children, 2 small 11-year-olds, twins, running up and down the house. My ex-wife is going crazy right now. My wife as well. And my grandchildren with me as well. So it's a little bit difficult for me to leave and to leave them there to come here and speak. I used to do that in the past, and I had no problem. But for me, it's a problem. Independently, and I will say this to you so you have an idea, I have not made it public in Spain, but I have spoken about it here in Germany to the students, and I will speak to you about it now. We recently signed a very important contract with Netflix. So everything that you will hear today here, you will able to hear about a year from now in your homes. Don't worry if you don't have Netflix. I'll make sure you get the documentary, okay? I'll look out for you. I guess maybe we can start from the beginning so you know a little bit about me, how I used to be. I'm not the typical death row inmate you will ever meet or hear about or watch on TV. I come from a good home, good family, excellent upbringing, good education. I can say I lived the American dream. Grew up in New York. At the age of 19, I was married. At the age of 20, I had my first daughter, 21, my second. And by 24 years old, I had my own company, my house on the beach, and my sports car. People on death row don't have any of that, okay? They come from broken homes, drug-related problems, and they live in a society that keeps them always margined and separated from everyone else. Of the 467 death row inmates I met, 90% of them could not read nor write. It's very difficult for them. Not everyone there could read. Not everyone had the choice of doing things the way I did. So I felt very fortunate. So let's go back to my life in New York, my beginnings. And I'm going to be honest with everyone here today, as I have been with the students, and as I've always been with everyone. I wasn't a very good person. I wasn't a very good father. I wasn't a very good son. And I wasn't a very good husband. I only thought about making money, working, and I only thought about material things. Never stopped to smell the coffee like they say in America. I grew up in a Catholic school, yet everyone in that Catholic school was from different races. So it's nice because when I see everyone here today, it makes me feel like I'm back home in New York, in my beginnings. We don't have this in Spain. You cannot imagine how fortunate you are here to live in a city like this. to be able to come together. It's beautiful. Beautiful mixture of cultures, religions. And that's what it's about. Together. Love, happiness. That's the way it should be always. Growing up in America was crazy. Living that American dream where you think that with money you can buy everything. I recall numerous times going out to restaurants, sit down in the dinner table and criticize the person serving me because either the glass was dirty or a fork or a plate was out of place. That's how I used to be. Arrogant, stupid. Back in 1996, as part of this American dream, I went through a very difficult divorce. Anyone divorced here understand how difficult that may be. It's taken me many years, believe me when I say this, to realize that throughout a divorce, the parents, me and my ex-wife in this case, spent more time saying that we were doing things for our kids when in fact we were trying to hurt one another. I did many things to hurt my ex-wife, never physically, and she did many things to hurt me as well. We had two beautiful daughters at that time, 1996. But I wanted custody of my children, and she wanted custody of the kids. And that's where the problem became. That same year, 1996, when I'm going through my divorce, a murder takes place in the city of Tampa, Florida. Two people are murdered. A young man, 23 years old, receives 9 impact wounds all across the body. The young woman, same age, receives close to 36, and I can be graphical now because we don't have young students that I speak to. 36 stab wounds throughout the back, including the head. Just so that you understand, because we have sometimes a way of thinking about things in America. I hear people say that they're barbaric. In some ways, they can be. But when it comes to death penalty, you have to understand something here today. In America, the death penalty is not applied to just anyone. If you're driving your vehicle and you run someone over and you kill them, you will not get the death penalty. In order to get the death penalty, the crime has to be so cruel, so heinous, so atrocious, that it deserves a death penalty. If a woman is stabbed to death 34, 36 times in the back of the head and throughout the back, that crime, according to the law in America, in Florida, deserves a death penalty. You can like it more, you can like it less. But it's the law. See, when I was in school with the students I was speaking to, their age, to say no to the death penalty, that was anti-American. It was like saying no to the war. You don't question the law. It's not something that you question in America. So you need to understand that so that when we speak about the death penalty, it's not the law itself that, that jeopardizes one. It's the thought and the people that vote for that law. When this crime takes place, back in 1996, there's a large outcry for justice. You see, how is it possible that two people in their homes, the safest place where you could be, can be murdered. How is that possible? But there are more questions to this case. The young man that was shot to death was a drug dealer and the son of a very important police officer, the head of the evidence department. He has many family members working at the police department. So this case has a double meaning. We have to find out who's responsible for the murder, and at the same time find out how it's possible that the son of a police officer, head of the evidence department, can deal drugs. When this young couple is found dead, they find a black book with many numbers and many names on it from the police department, from people that had stores, businesses, all related to crime, money laundering, stolen vehicles, etc. They arrest over 165 people. And at the end, the question was, excellent work, police department, but who killed this couple? Comes into picture Joaquín José Martínez. From this point on, Joe, because everyone called me Joe in America. My friends call me Joe, and you can call me Joe. On a typical Saturday afternoon, January 26th, I had to visit my two little girls at my ex-wife's home. And I tell my ex-wife, I'm sorry, but I have to go to work. I can't visit my daughters today. I lied. In reality, I was going to Disney World with my new girlfriend to celebrate her birthday. I said before, and I won't repeat it, I wasn't a good father. I try to be today, but I wasn't back then. The following day, Sunday, January 27th, was a big sports event, Super Bowl Sunday. I don't want to go into detail. I'm sure you know how it is. If you don't know Super Bowl Sunday, well, just imagine the Champions League. My team, Real Madrid. Dominic, this is the part where people throw things at me. I remember that day clearly because I say, okay, today I can go visit the children. And I arrive at her home, my ex-wife's home, and as I am leaving her home after half an hour of discussion about these murders that had taken place, because let's be clear, there was a poster about this size placed all across the city. It had the victim's face, a phone number of the police department, like you see in the movies and in the series, reward in big letters, and $10,000 reward. That Saturday afternoon when I called and said, I'm going to work, my ex-wife right away called my job, and the secretary told her that I was celebrating my fiance's birthday. You have to keep in mind that this new person, this woman, was the reason, according to my ex-wife, we divorced. She became very angry, ran out the house, went to the poster, and called the phone number and spoke to the police. The conversation, from what I gathered later on, was the following. It's possible that my ex-husband knows something about that murder and those two people that were killed. My ex-husband knows everybody. You need to talk to him, investigate him. Okay. I have to stop here, break, and say, at this point, I don't think that my ex-wife called the police to send me to death row. I don't think that she was aware of how serious this crime was. And so, as I leave her home, the following day after that phone call, and I visited my daughters finally, I get on my sports car with the windows down, my music up. And I get to the stop sign, and I stop because a car cuts in front of me from the left, another one from the right. I look at the rear view mirror, and there's two cars behind me closing me in so that I can't move. I look up, there's helicopters, one on each side. One is news and one is police. And I see people in the military come out with SWAT teams, rifles. And you say, well, that's exaggerated. No, not at all. Let me explain something to everyone here today, because I lived in America practically all my life. When you see on TV, on the news, that there's a small little car in a big road, in a big highway, and there are 10 cars following that car behind them, and there are helicopters following that little car, all that happens in 30 minutes. 30 minutes is the response time that they have. Can you imagine what they had ready for me? Since the day before, when my ex-wife called, I mean, they're looking for the murderer of a police officer's son. To make it worse, my ex-wife says, be careful with him, he's dangerous. He has 2 guns. It's true. 9mm guns, registered. The crime scene, they found the shells of a 9mm gun. So they said in their minds, we got him. That's what they thought. Now they got my ex-wife talking. And as I see all this going on, the police take me out of the car, they throw me on the floor like you've seen a million times. They do that to everyone. And they throw me on the floor, and they put their knee on my back, and they arrest me. With my face on the ground, I see my little girls. They take me to the police house, and they begin to question me. They throw these cassettes. Okay, this is good because cassettes. When I explain in the schools to the students cassettes, they look at me, what? What, cassettes? So I have to tell them, before we had pen drives, USB, we had CDs. Before CDs, cassettes. And they, oh, yeah. But I think they still don't understand that because they're so young and it's a different mentality now. Things have changed now. And they throw these cassettes at me and they say, we have it all on tape. Now we want to hear it from you. We want to hear your confession. And they give me 3 sheets of paper and a pen. And they say, write your confession. And I say, I haven't confessed to anything. They say, yes, you have. Write your confession. We go through this half an hour. And at the very end, I say, no more. I want to speak to my attorney. And I speak to my personal attorney, my traffic ticket attorney, my divorce attorney, my attorney for everything. And I call him, I say, Tom, we got a problem here. They're charging me with double murder. And he tells me the famous American words. I lived in America all my life. The words I always heard all the time. Don't worry. Don't worry. And I said, well, I'm worried because it's Super Bowl Sunday and I can't watch the game. I want to go home. And unfortunately, I didn't go home that evening. And unfortunately, the weeks and months began to go by. And I was still arrested. And I explain all this to you so that you can understand what evidence they had against me to send me to death row. We'll get to death row. Give me time. And I say, okay, I want to hear the confession. And my attorney says, it's inaudible. It needs to be sent to the FBI laboratory to be enhanced. And this takes another couple months. And they send back the tapes. And they say the tapes can't be heard. They say, we can't do anything with the tapes. The FBI laboratory. Can you imagine how that sounds? A police department sets up what they call a sting operation, 24 hours of preparation, 3 microphones, 1 camera, and you can't hear my confession? I knew at that point something was wrong. The prosecutor says, no problem. What we're going to do is the following. Since some parts of the conversation can be heard, we're going to prepare a transcript. You can imagine who prepared the transcript. The victim's friends that worked for the police department, prosecutor, the victim's father. I didn't know this till my second trial. The victim's father. And with that trial, they said we can go to, with that transcript, they said we could go to trial. But before trial, they say to me, do you really want to clear your name? Do you want to go home? And I say, yeah. I said, well, let's do a DNA test. Let me explain to everyone what happened there. They find hair samples, blood, saliva, fingerprints. Under the female victim, her fingernails, blood, and skin. They're called in America defense wounds. As she was defending herself, she scratched the person. And that's from that person, or persons. What they found didn't match them, so it matched someone else. So I say, okay, perfect. Why not? I know I'm innocent. Let's do it. We do the DNA test. And a few months later, the results come back. Negative. So I say, great, Tom, I can go home, right? We go to a special hearing with the judge, prosecutor, and my attorney, Mr. Don't Worry. And the prosecutor says, you know, this evidence means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that Mr. Martinez was there when those people were killed. Someone else that he was with left DNA. But since there's no one else here, Mr. Martinez will be going to trial. This evidence, plus my ex-wife's testimony, plus my ex-girlfriend's testimony that they forced to change in the last minute, was the only thing they had. No physical evidence linking me to this murder. I have to say one thing before we continue. That there today in America wouldn't be enough to go to trial. Today. But when I went to trial back in 1996, it was more than enough. There were no guarantees. They needed convictions and everything possible to do so. As I'm waiting, once I'm sentenced to death, for transport to pick me up, the prosecutor comes in and says to me, Joe, I have a surprise for you. And I said, more? He takes me out of the room, dressed in orange, handcuffed. And he brings me to another room where my daughters are standing there. And they're crying. And my parents are there, my ex-wife is there. You are older. It's not like speaking to the students. Some of you have children, you know what it's like not to be with your kids for a long period of time. I've been here without my twins for a week. I'm going crazy already because I missed them. Can you imagine a year and a half not seeing them? The last image I have of my kids is me with my face on the floor being arrested in front of them. And here I am, seeing them again a year and a half later, and I go to hug my kids, handcuffed, and they tell me I can't touch my kids. It's a security measure. I can't come near my children. I try to explain it to the students. They can't understand it. I know those that have children here understand what I'm talking about. It's not an easy feeling. My father breaks all the rules at that moment and runs to me and gives me a hug and says, he tells me in Spanish, Joaquín, haremos todo lo posible por sacarte de ahí. We'll do everything possible to get you out of there. And they sent me to death row in 1997. Let me tell you about death row in 1997, because I give you dates, I give you days, I give you names. It's very important, everything that I say to you today, because we have Google today. You go on Google when you finish, you say 1997, Florida, death penalty. 1997. The only means of execution is the electric chair. That's the only means. There's no lethal injection like there is today. And the Florida Supreme Court is debating whether or not they should continue executing people with the chair or change to lethal injection, because they've executed 2 death row inmates with such an overcharge that they have suffered 5 minutes of agony and pain throughout the execution. And more than one of you, and maybe not here, but somewhere out there, are thinking, well, that person deserved it. Who cares? He's a monster. He's a killer. 5 minutes he screamed. That's not enough. People will think that. And I have that on my mind on my way to prison, to death row. And when I finally get inside my cell, after I received the initial beating, the door closes, and I was very faithful. I was very with God in my life. But at that moment, I lose all my faith. I was angry with God, my friends. I was alone. And as I am sitting in my cell by myself, and I cannot explain how the cell is, but I want you to have an idea. 2x4, from this wall to here to that wall. Even smaller. And I'm sitting there, and I'm crying, and I begin to hear the voices of the so-called monsters, those that I had criticized all my life. And they're saying to me, "You're the Spanish guy. You're the one from Spain." I say, "Yeah." "Do you need something to write? Do you need some paper, pen?" "Do you need something to read? Something to eat?" At that point, I began to see a different side that I never was aware of. But no, that wasn't enough to change my mind. I still continued believing in the death penalty at that point. But there was more things that would take place. Every time they tested that electric chair, when that Supreme Court decides that they need to run tests to make sure it works well, we would have a lamp. We didn't have any halogens. We didn't have any fluorescent lights. We had what we see in the movies in the past. 1996, it was a very old prison. To be quite honest with you, that prison doesn't exist anymore where it was. That's how old it was. You had the lamp, the light bulb. When they would test the chair, which they did every single day, you would see how the light would flicker, shut off, and turn back on. And at that point, you knew that the electric chair had been applied. Every single day. That is psychological torture. Because one day that's going to be you being executed. And when the Supreme Court decides that the chair is fixed, they begin to execute death row inmates, friends of mine. And the executions are not the way you used to see it on TV or in the movies, where you see the big guy walking out all strong, let's get this over with. They're crying. They're speaking to their pastor. Will it hurt me? Will I be forgiven? The night before, we all pray, each one in our own religion. We're all believers on death row. Hope is the only thing that can keep us together and keep us alive. And some of us cry, and we all think about this friend of ours that will be executed the following day. Do you know that when they execute someone, they sign the death warrant 30 days before? So if they were supposed to execute me next month, they would sign my death warrant today, and 30 days from today, the 22nd of December, for example, I knew I would be executed. Not just the day, the hour and the minute. 30 days thinking you're going to be executed, knowing you're going to die. There is no hope at that point. You know when they execute you, what they do? They take you dressed for execution, and in the past it was the electric chair. Now it's lethal injection. But they place you in front of the clock so you can see the last minute of your life. Can you imagine the last minute of a death row inmate's life? The thoughts that are going through his mind? It's so, it's not funny, but it's so weird that you can, the mentality of some people out in America. I was with a journalist today speaking to her, and I wanted to get that point clear, because in America, when we speak about death penalty, there are only two things that are important. The death row inmate's last words before he gets executed, and what he ate the night before. I want you to think about that for a minute. What he ate the night before. I am over 50 years old. I'll be 54 next week. And I've had major exams, major job interviews, major things that took place in my life. And I don't recall the night before any of these things feeling hungry or even eating. Can you imagine a person that's going to be executed at 7 o'clock in the morning? He has just visited his loved ones. He has just said goodbye to his mom, his dad, his son, whoever came to visit him. Sitting down on a table alone to enjoy his last meal. I mean, do you really think that's important? Do you really think that person eats that day? Visits. Whew. The death row inmates get very few visits. I used to get a lot. I was fortunate to get a lot of visits. And I saw many people visiting friends of mine on death row. And, you know, to this day, I don't remember clearly the death row inmates, my friends, their faces. But I remember clearly the mothers, the fathers, and the children of each and every single one of them. Hugging them, because on death row, yeah, you can hug at least. And saying, son, we're getting you a good attorney. Be patient. Have faith. You're going to go home. And the children. Dad, when are you coming home? I think about them every day. None of them are here anymore. They've all been executed or died of natural causes. So it's a very heavy cross for me to come here and remember them and speak for them that cannot speak. Even with all this, I continue believing in the death penalty. Because I thought of that closure. And there's one person that changed my life. And I'll take him with me everywhere the rest of my life. His name was Frank Lee Smith. Once again, we all have Google. We all have phones nowadays. It's beautiful. I love technology. Not for my kids, but but I love technology. Frank Lee Smith. Tall, black, African-American, strong guy. I'm short, so to me everyone's tall, but this guy was big. Sentenced to death for the rape and murder of a 9-year-old little girl. So stop, because I know it's, you can just imagine the compassion that the guards had for this man. The humanity, none, zero. Who would have compassion for a murder of a 9-year-old little girl? That 9-year-old girl could be me, one of my daughters. Frank Lee Smith. Postcards would come from all over the world. Close to 400 letters a week. And close to 200, 300 postcards. I would pass them to my friends on death row. And I would explain to them where each place was. And I felt in some ways that would maybe transport them out of death row for a few minutes. Just a few minutes. And I would tell them, you know, this is Paris. This is the Eiffel Tower. Back then I used to get a lot from Germany. You know from what? The Berlin Wall. A lot. From Spain as well. France, everywhere. And I would give them to Frank. And as you can imagine, after 19 years, Frank wasn't doing too good mentally. No one can stand that much time on death row, believe me. It's not easy. In his little sanity that remained in his mind, he would always say to me the same thing. Joe, when you go back to those places, imagine what I'm going to tell you, because it's just the way I'm telling you. When you go back to those places, you remember me, you take me with you. So I make it a point anywhere I go in the world and I speak about the death penalty to mention Frank, because he's the reason I'm against the death penalty. Frank will get up 3 o'clock in the morning, screaming, "Get me out of here, I'm innocent," jump on the cell bars and shake them. And we would all say, "Frank, don't scream, please." The guards are going to come down the stairs. They're going to open your door, and they're going to beat you. And he will continue. And you could hear the chains, and they will come down, and they will beat him. Sometimes the beatings were so severe, they would have to take him to the infirmary to treat his wounds. They don't want to kill Frank. They want to execute him. You understand? And he would come the following day, or that same evening, except for the last time I saw him in our cell block. They beat him, and he didn't come back. First, we thought they had taken him to another area of the prison. I also thought they may have killed him. But that wasn't the case. They took him to another area that I was able to see a year later, when I was granted my new trial, because I had support that he didn't receive. I was given this new trial after receiving the support of the European Parliament, the Spanish government, the Italian Senate, Pope John Paul II. I mean, they helped me get a new trial. And of course, my parents. My parents were everything to me. And when I have to go by the infirmary to get my blood work done before being transported for this new trial, I see Frank Lee Smith. And he's laying on a bed about the size of this table here. And he is handcuffed to the bed, shackled to the bed, and a leather waist restraining belt around his waist to the bed. And he's shaking because he's dying. Can you imagine how they had him tied down? He couldn't even move. I walked by him, I said hello like I always did. He didn't even recognize me. He was dying. He was dying of cancer. Can you imagine the compassion the doctors had on him, or the nurses? Who would have compassion for the killer, once again, of a 9-year-old little girl? Who would have humanity? Would you have a kind word for a person like that? Especially working for an institution called death row? You know the saddest part about Frank? I'm going to tell you the saddest part about Frank's life. The saddest part about Frank's life is not that he spent 19 years on death row alone, abandoned by his family, tortured, beat, had to overcome sickness, and in the end die of cancer. No, that wasn't the worst part about all this. The worst part about all this is that he spent 19 years asking to get DNA testing like they did on me so that he can prove his innocence. They tested Frank Lee Smith a year after he was dead. And discovered he was innocent. "19 years on death row." I don't think anyone here today can imagine what that's like. I was there 2.5 years, didn't make it past 2, and I was going crazy the last few months. 19 years abandoned, no mail, no visits, abandoned by your family, dying of cancer, and you're innocent? You know the worst part about it is? They find, through the DNA, the person that killed the little 9-year-old girl. He confesses, and they find that he had killed 2 more children after Frank Lee Smith's arrest. If they would have caught the right person, not only would they have saved Frank Lee Smith the fate that he received, they would have saved the life of 2 little girls. But that is how corrupt the system is. And it hurts to think that. And it hurts to think that I was in a bubble where they told me everything, and they said, "Joe, people that go to jail, people that go to prison, people that go to death row are guilty." And I believed it. Because let me be clear with you. If I'm on the jury, I'm part of the jury panel. There's 13. I'm part of that jury panel. And I walk out and I sit with my fellow jury members. And a prosecutor stands up and says, "That man right there, Joaquín José Martínez, killed the son of that other man right back there." And he points to the first 2 rows, over 20 police officers with uniform. If I'm on that jury, I don't need 7 days. I don't need 1 day. I don't need 1 second. Guilty. Because you're conditioned to think that the system is perfect when it's not. You've been living a lie I was very fortunate to receive the support I received, to be able to learn what I've learned on death row, because believe me, I've learned a lot. And I wish I could say that my life has been perfect. It has, in many ways. I've had ups and downs that you can't even imagine here today. After death row, I went into death row with 2 little girls, my 2 little Jordan and Catherine. Now I have 4 grandchildren from them and 5 more kids. So I have 7 kids and 4 grandchildren. So that's happy, yeah. The last 2, the twins, some of them here know them. They drive you crazy. They don't get up Monday through Friday to go to school. Come Saturday, they get up 1 hour before. Wake me up, jump on top of the bed. Dad, let's go, park, let's go. I miss them dearly, you know. So that is good news, and many other good things have happened to me. But things do tend to happen sometimes without you expecting it. I've dedicated my life to speak out against the death penalty. I've been all over the world. If I start numbering the places I've been to, we'd be here all night, really. Schools everywhere. Since day one with the community Sant'Egidio, the first year that I was released, I was already with them. They call me, I leave everything to come here. Here or any part of the world they call me from. But, you know, there was a small question that was in my mind that I didn't have an answer for the first few years of my life after death row. And of course, it's from students. But the students are very direct. Media, you can expect what they're going to ask you. But when I go to speak at schools, they tell me you have 1 hour, leave enough time for questions. I say, perfect, I want to speak 59 minutes. Because the students, when they talk, when they ask, and I'm going to summarize a question that one student made to me with the community Sant'Egidio. It was in Sicily, and there was the auditorium, all students from everywhere. And I finished speaking, and a young girl gets up. And I'm saying, well, here comes the questions. I'm ready now. She says, Joaquín, you're against the death penalty because you went to death row. Because if you hadn't gone to death row, today, you would still believe in the death penalty. And I answered, maybe yes, maybe no. And here comes the question. Joaquín, how would you feel if someone killed one of your loved ones? Your daughters, your mom, or your father? How would you feel? How would you react? And at that point, she begins to tell me a story. And she's crying to me. And I see her, I see how emotional she is. And she tells me how her father was killed right in front of her by the family, the mafia in Italy. And when she finishes telling me the story, she asked me, tell me, how would you feel? What would you think about death penalty if someone killed your father? The answer didn't come right away. I slept with this question many, many months. But a little bit over a year, the answer came. Valencia, Spain, 2003. 2 years after my release. Big soccer match, Valencia, Real Madrid. Dad, living in Madrid. Come with mom, spend a few days here in Valencia with me. Watch a beautiful match. Madrid won, by the way. The next day, my parents went to buy some groceries so that my mother can make my special meal. You know how mothers are. They always take care of their children. And I went to work. And while at work, they called me from the hospital. You need to come to the hospital. Your father's not doing well. When I got to the hospital, they told me that my father had been run over by a 17-year-old on a motorcycle while he was crossing the street. And when I saw the doctor, he took me in to see my father. And he was dead. It wasn't like in the series or the movies that we see sometimes. The doctor comes out and tells the family, no, 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 no. He told me first and took me into the room where my father was at to see that he had passed away. And I had to go out of that room and tell my mother that her husband, my father, was dead. The screams could be heard in the whole building. I can understand. I don't justify. I can understand when someone here today, any of you, watch something on TV. Let's be clear. A bombing, war, it doesn't matter for what side, Ukraine, Russia, Palestinian, Israel, something happens, or you even hear in the news about a father that's killed his children. I can understand, not justify, that at some point, while seeing that on TV, on the news, you will feel, maybe some of you rage, maybe more than one of you hatred, some of you even vengeance. At some time, maybe not someone here, but someone out there, that person deserves a death penalty. I can understand that. Because when I had to tell my mother that my father, my Superman, had passed away, I felt hatred, a need for vengeance, and I wanted to run out the hospital door and grab that 17-year-old. I had not killed anyone my whole life, but that day would have been special. My mother is a Hispanic, Spanish woman. I'm not saying that others from other countries are the same, but I know how my mother is. She sees how I am, and she sees how upset I am, and she grabs me by the shoulders. She shakes me, and she says, and I'll never forget in Spanish, Joaquín, ¿no has aprendido nada? Have you not learned anything? I said earlier, I will be 54 years old next week. I've had many ups and downs. I can't go through everything I've been through in my life. But of all the things I've been through, death penalty. I've come close to losing one of my children because of a heart problem. And many other things have happened. The worst thing, the most difficult for me thing to be able to overcome was to forgive the 17-year-old that had killed my father. That is the truth. Not even death penalty can take that away from me. I forgave him for 3 reasons. And with this, I'm going to close. I forgave him because, number one, my mother asked me to. The students at class today, they don't have that connection yet with their parents, you know. They're arguing with their parents because they're young, like we used to be, like I used to be. I used to argue with my parents all the time, you know. And I was always right, and they were wrong. And I had to tell them today, listen, students, one day in the future, you'll realize that you were the one that was wrong, and your parents only want the very best for you. And that's what mothers are. They only want the best for you. So when my mom asked me to forgive this young man, I forgave him. It was difficult to do so. Believe me, it was hard, but I did it. Moms, man. Well, I miss my mom now. She went away as well. And for me, they're God's greatest gift. I have to admit, I can't say enough about mothers. They're special. The second reason is, remember what it was like to be 17? That could have been me. Not on a motorcycle, on my sports car. I went through life crazy. You can't even imagine how I was at 17. I would drive drunk, drugged, to the next VIP party. That could have been me killing someone's father. And here comes the good one. The third reason why I forgave. And this took me a lot of time to react upon and to reflect upon the whole situation. The reason why I believed in the death penalty was because I thought it would bring closure to the victims' families. If they saw the person that had killed their loved ones executed, I really thought you would find closure. It's been over 20 years since my father passed away. There is nothing that could close the wounds of having lost my father. I could close my eyes and see the young man executed 100 times before me, and there is nothing, believe me when I say this, that could take away the pain of having lost my father. I still miss him today. That, my friends, that is the lesson. I don't come to Germany, Würzburg, to speak out against the death penalty as a cruel law, inhuman law. I come here to speak out against the death penalty because of what it represents. The lack of compassion, frankly, Smith. The lack of humanity, the lack of love, the lack of forgiveness. There's no room for that in our society. You do not have the death penalty here in Germany, yet you are witness to everything that's going on in the rest of the world. Or what do you think? It's better that we have wars out there? That's the same thing. It's a cycle of vengeance. You killed my family, and I'm going to kill yours. I'm going to take your territory, you're going to take mine. That's the way it works. Always for reasons, for the wrong reasons, and always the people on top making you think that they're doing the right thing. That's why I come to the schools, to the students. Some of you have reached a point, an age, where it's very difficult to change your mindsets. I know. It's difficult to change a person that's taught the same way throughout 40 years or 30 years. You've been taught to do it or to think that it's this way. And unless something happens to you the way it happened to me, it's very difficult. You will change your perception. But it's important that you know, that you're aware that there are more things in this world, in this society that we live in. There's no room for the hatred that we are living today. Society has gotten worse than it was 10 years ago. And there is nothing that our governments can do to make us feel safer. Nothing, absolutely nothing. That's why I come here. I come here to speak to the students, to let them know that they can make a difference, that 10 years from now, they could be in a government place, making a change, making it different. And if anyone thinks it's not possible, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I don't have one person. I have people tell me, I became a lawyer because of you. I became a doctor because of you. I work for the government because of you. because you came to my school one day and you spoke to me, you told me the truth. And that's what it's about. It's about me telling you, because I know each and every one of you has or will have something not good happen to you in your lives. I know. We all go through that. But I think I'm the best example of how you could turn something negative into something positive. I really thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's not easy for me to be able to speak about friends of mine that are no longer here. But I feel it's my job, my duty, not just to be here today, but to be tomorrow in Munich, the next day in Berlin, and to come back here 2 years or 3 years from now again. And I'll be glad to come back here. And maybe by then you'll have seen the Netflix documentary too. So I love you all. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Joaquín. Dankeschön, vielen Dank. Ich glaube, du hast unsere Herzen alle berührt mit dem, was du erzählt hast. Und wir sind dankbar, dass du so offen sprichst, auch wenn es nicht leicht ist. Es ist jetzt, glaube ich, auch gut, oder du möchtest es auch, dass wer eine Frage hat, die auch stellen darf, mit dir ins Gespräch zu kommen. Ist es okay? I think so. Yes. Also wer von euch eine Frage stellen möchte, kann diese gerne stellen. Wir können das Mikrofon auch geben, dann können die Übersetzer hören. Okay.
Primero que nada, quiero agradecerte por tus palabras, por esa fuerza que tienes para alzar la voz y decirnos a todos lo que tú viviste, porque fue algo muy, muy fuerte, muy duro, muy difícil. Y te abrazo con el corazón y espero que sigas elevando esa voz y que se la entregues a esos niños, a esos jóvenes, nosotros a los adultos también, para aportar un granito más de arena. Quiero saber si tú crees que la justicia ha mejorado con respecto a esos años que tú fuiste injustamente condenado.
Gracias, lo primero de todo. Ahora después te doy el abrazo de verdad. Hello. Oh, okay. I can honestly say that the system has changed. Law is not the same as it was years ago. We had a serious problem with, just to have an idea, I was granted a new trial based on prosecutorial misconduct, which means that the prosecution didn't do things the right way they should have done. There are more guarantees now. When I arrived on death row, we were 476, then 467. Right now, there's about 250 death row inmates in Florida. And that just means that there's less people being sentenced to death. There are more guarantees. What they did to me, I just spoke a 10% of what they did to me. They changed the date of death on me. They said I killed these people on a Friday. They were still alive Saturday night, just so you have an idea. They asked the doctor, why did you change the time of death? The doctor said, well, it's what the police department told me. Nothing happens to the doctor, nothing happens to the police department. The victim's father, even the victim's father was willing to help me. He was going to testify on the second trial. He is the head of the evidence department, and he was caught in the lie of tampering with evidence. And yet he wasn't able to do so. I see and I watch so many things, and I don't believe half the things that I see many times. And when they told me that he had died of a heart attack 3 months before the second trial, he was supposed to testify on my behalf, I really didn't believe it. There was just too much going on back then, and like I said, the whole department was under scrutiny. The whole system, not just the police department, the whole court system was really, really corrupt. As a result of my release, and being honest with everyone here today, I was the first Spanish and European to be released from death row in America. I was number 96 in all of America. It's a big country, 400 million people. The chances of being sent to death row are winning the Powerball, the biggest lottery. And the chances of going to death row and being released are winning it 2 times. That's impossible. And you know what? Thanks to all that took place, more death row inmates were released, among them more Europeans. So yeah, I was the first one, but after me, there were others. And I truly believe, and let me be honest with you, because even though I'm hard with the system, I'm hard with the way they did things with me, I truly believe that today, less people being sentenced to death being innocent. I really do believe that. And that there are more guarantees. Just to give you a clear idea, to be sentenced to death, when I was sentenced to death, you needed a unanimous vote. The vote was 10 votes to 2 in my case. 10 jury members voted yes, and 2 voted no to death penalty. It was enough to send me to death row. Today, the law states the following: it has to be unanimous. If you send someone to death row, it has to be unanimous. So today, even if it had gone to trial, I wouldn't have gotten the death penalty. In fact, when we began the second process, when I went back for my new process, they didn't seek the death penalty. Can you imagine how unjust that is? Did you hear what I just said? They didn't seek the death penalty. The death penalty is only applied to the most cruel, heinous, atrocious crimes. A woman that is stabbed to death 34 times, according to the system, deserves the death penalty. But when I start trial, in my second trial, they don't seek the death penalty. How is that justice? What had changed? I'm still the same person. Was it the senators that came from Spain? The members of the European Parliament? I'm still Spanish. It's the same judge. What's changed? Let me tell you something. If it would have been anyone else sitting where I was sitting that day, Hispanic, minority, black, without support, they would have sought the death penalty. How fair can that be? How unjust can you say, well, we can make exceptions to who we apply the death penalty to? When they told me they weren't seeking the death penalty, and I looked at the victims' families, I saw their faces, and I was like, what? Really? I mean, you're not seeking the death penalty? 34 stab wounds, and you're not seeking the death penalty? How is that justice? That's nothing. I mean, the last day of trial, they have another private meeting, and they come out and say to me, my attorney, I see he goes to speak to my father first, and he tells my father something. I didn't hear what he said, and my father shakes his head no, and I see the attorney come to me, my new attorneys, and they asked me, Joaquín, if they came to you with a paper today, and they said for you to sign it, would you accept time served? You don't have to say you're guilty. just that things weren't the way they were supposed to be, would you sign it, you know? And I said, no. We're going to trial. I came this far. I'm innocent. I'm going home. That's something else I didn't mention. Blind faith is total faith. When you really believe something's going to happen, and you really pray, you do everything possible for it to happen. If it has to happen, it will happen. When I left death row, all my belongings, I gave away to everyone on death row. I knew I wasn't going back. I had no doubt I wasn't going back. I mean, even the guards. The head of the prison takes me out the door, greets me. The handcuffs are not so tight as they were when I first got in there. I'm going for my new trial. And I'm walking out the door, and the guard, this big guy, he hits me in the back of the shoulder and says, I don't want you ever back here, boy. I don't want to ever see you again. This is my prison. If you come back here, you know what's waiting for you. Good luck. They knew I wasn't coming back either.
Jetzt noch eine andere Frage. Ich glaube, ein bisschen Zeit haben wir noch, wenn ihr Zeit habt.
Muchas gracias, Joaquín.
Gracias.
I would like to ask, what determines how much time people spend in death row?
I guess what determines what the time you spend in death row is the appeals that you go through. It's a very long, hard appeal process. When I got to death row, they said to me, Joaquín, you're going to be here at least 5 years. Really? The Supreme Court takes a long time to review your case. And I said, I hope they start soon, you know. It all depends on the attorneys that you get, and it all depends on the Supreme Court. In my case, it was 2 years, 3 months on death row. The first year we spent looking for the perfect group of attorneys. Not me, my parents. Because at that point I gave up. I said, Mom, Dad, it's all on you. I did enough stupid things in the past, you know. I let go. I said, Mom, Dad, it's on you. The last year was preparing the brief, the appeal brief, and it took the Supreme Court only 3 months to grant me a new trial. Unanimous new trial. That's record time, record decision. The Supreme Court never rules 7-0. They always rule 6-1, 4-3, 7-0. And they gave instructions to the courts. If I was to be tried again, they needed to be careful what evidence was provided. The main reason for my new trial was prosecutorial and police misconduct. That's what determines your attorney, the appeal process. Sometimes it takes 15 years, sometimes it takes 20. It's a long time to wait to be executed, which in the end is your punishment, supposed to be. I mean, you're supposed to be executed, that's your punishment. But it turns out that you spend 20 years on death row receiving physical torture, mental torture. It's too long, way too long, believe me. I mean, at the very end of my stay on death row, I needed medication to sleep. And I was tempted because almost everyone, 85% of the guys on death row, be clear, 85% take something to go to sleep or to maintain themselves throughout the day. It's just too much tension throughout the day, way too much. Anybody else? Yeah.
I also want to say thank you so much for being so open and honest in your talk. I have a question about the process of the people being sentenced to death. Maybe you could talk about how they react when they realize the death sentence and the process, the different stages maybe of how their way of thinking changes.
Of the people being sentenced to death?
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's always, let me tell you something, people will, and you have to understand this, people do change. I always thought that people don't change. People change. You know, I never killed anyone in my life, but I'm not the same person I was before death row. I'm not thankful for going to death row, okay? But I must say I'm not the same person. I must say that person is someone else from my past, and I'm not proud of having been that person. You know, I think people do change, and I think that there's a process for people that don't go insane when they're sentenced to death, where you either go insane, like I just mentioned, or you get yourself together and you say, hey, I got a reason to live. You know, I'm inside, just to be able, the thought of returning to my kids was enough. The rest of what made me stronger in death row was that I wanted to prove to the world that I was innocent, that it wasn't a mistake, you know, that everything that had happened to me happens to other people. And that was what happened in the end. So, anybody else? I know you guys are waiting for a Netflix documentary, huh? Then you'll get all the answers there. I know. I'll be watching Netflix too. Now more than ever.
Erstmal natürlich Dankeschön für Ihren Vortrag. Wir lernen immer und wieder neue Geschichten, neue Leute, wo denkst du, das gibt's ganz schwere Schicksale im Leben. Und eine Frage, wie kann das sein, dass in so ein demokratisches Land wie Amerika bis heute gibt es noch Todesstrafe? Und nicht wie nur Todesstrafe, sondern diese Quälerei, wir haben sie jetzt alles beschrieben, ja, wo Mensch ist schon so verurteilt, brutal verurteilt, ja, zum Todesstrafe, was eigentlich schon unmöglich ist, ja, weil so viel Fehler passiert, ja, in Gerichten und so. Und haben Sie Hoffnung, dass irgendwann wird abgeschafft? Weil wir wissen von Guantanamo in Amerika, wo Leute werden unverurteilt, ganze Leben gehalten. Wie kann das sein? Haben Sie eine Hoffnung oder nicht? Danke sehr.
Thank you. It's a good question, and yes, we do have hope. And I'll explain to you why we have hope. Since I was released, I was the number 96 to be released from death row. And there's been 104 more since I was released. we are a total of 200 death row inmates all across the nation that were released. There are, since my release in 2001, 4 states that have abolished the death penalty, and more states that are considering it. And I think we're headed in the right direction. And I think the main reason we're headed in the right direction is because we have more resources now. You know, when I went to school, and I believed in the death penalty, we didn't have Google. We didn't have anything that spoke about anything that happened outside of our country, of that world that I was living in. We weren't aware of public opinion. We weren't aware of what the Europeans thought about us. We were only aware of what we were taught at school and what we saw on TV. When I got released from death row, Google. Excellent. Excellent means of communication with the rest of the world. All of a sudden now, everyone in the States knows that there are innocent people going to prison. I didn't know there was innocent people until I got sentenced to death. Today, 20 years later, social media. If social media can do anything positive, is communicate to all ages of people what is happening in the world. There's a lot of lies, yeah, but it's the easiest and quickest way to communicate and to let people know what's going on. That helps. That helps in changing the mentality of many of the lawmakers, of many of the people in America. And that's what makes it possible for, like I said, 4 states to have abolished the death penalty, more states to do so. A governor that says 10 years ago, released 5 death row inmates. Governor Ryan out of Illinois exonerated them. One of them was a friend of mine, Mario Flores. Unfortunately, he's not allowed back in the U.S. They don't let anyone come back in if you're an immigrant, like in my case. I'm a Spaniard. Well, not in my case. I'm a Spaniard, I'm a little bit the exception. I think I'm the only death row inmate or person that has been condemned to a sentence over 30 years, even though innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter to them, that is allowed to re-enter U.S. territory. I have my residence in America. I even have my driver's license in America. So they're changing little by little. We got to give them time. We got to help them. The best way to change someone is not to tell them that they're doing it wrong. You got to tell them that they could do it better. And that's how you change them.